Hi, and thank you for joining our YouTube video called Write On, Taking Your Writing to the Next Level for a Stronger Paper. I'm the director of the Writing Center here at Illinois Wesleyan, Anna, and I will take you through some of our tips for how to create stronger papers. Tonight, we'll look at 10 tips to take your writing further, and I'll provide some advice and examples. I'll also offer some resources for furthering your writing goals. And I just want to remind you that if you have any questions, you should visit the Writing Center Tutoring Services in Ames Library. We're in room 105B. You can also email me at ascanlon@iwu.edu. If you'd like a copy of this PowerPoint, you can email me and I will be able to send it to you. So our first tip for writing is one that we also recommend for studying when our student success tutors take their presentations out to the community. Find your writing space. We often try to write in a vacuum. Maybe we think noise is going to distract us or the TV will distract us, but sometimes writing can be viewed as a social activity. We're writing with an audience in mind. The ideas of others that we're relying on or refuting are in our head as we take pen to paper. And a notion of some broader discourse community also finds its way into our writing. So silence is not always the best for writing. We recommend instead finding music that soothes you, a TV show for good background noise, preferably one you've seen many times before, or even a more social place to write, like our new writing centers and tutoring services space over in Ames Library. Silence is good too if you need it to work, but try out a variety of options and places to get the most out of your writing. We have a lot of new furniture over here in Ames Library that you can try out, from couches and chairs to tables and our nook. So check it all out and see if something might work better for you. We also recommend that as you find your writing space, you make sure that you're comfortable when you write by getting good seating, comfy clothes, and any tea, coffee, or snacks you might need to keep powering through. We also want to recommend that you be prepared to write by hand so as not to get distracted by your phone or computer. Additionally, jotting down notes by hand about your work encourages a different part of your brain than typing and allows you to think critically in a different way about your work. You're not stuck so much in the editing process as Word underlines things or recommends you fix them. We also recommend that you get useful writing utensils to make notes on your printouts. You'll notice in the Writing Center Tutoring Services space, we have dry erase markers, we have highlighters, we have pens and pencils. We recommend you do the same for yourself and use Post-it notes and color coding too, if those are things that help you get more organized and more into your writing in that space. Another suggestion that we always make and that our student success tutors are going to back us up on is that you make sure you have a clear understanding of the prompt and/or topic. We ask you to think about whether or not you understand what your professor is asking for. We'll have a video on that soon on YouTube as well. We also want to know if you understand what the conversation around what you're writing about is focused on. If you can confidently answer yes to both of these questions, then you're already doing this work. But if you're unsure, if you're not positive you get what the prompt is asking, here are a few things to keep in mind. You should ask questions when the professor gives out the assignment in class, but make sure they've finished explaining themselves and offered, does anyone have any questions? We also recommend you make notes on the prompt itself. Write down questions that you have about words, explanations, or other points you don't understand, and make sure to ask the professor about them during class. If something comes up later, by all means, you should go to the professor's office hours, and as a last resort, send them questions via email. But don't wait till the night before. Then you can also look up what others are saying about this topic. Who are the big names in the field? What are the key points they make? What do journalists, researchers, and scholars, among others, have to say about these big names and/or their theories? You can also think about it in terms of what other writing centers, what other campuses are saying about these assignments. So go ahead and Google what your research argumentative paper is. Go ahead and look up what a rhetorical analysis entails. See how other people define these areas to get a broader understanding of the prompt and topic. We also recommend you move beyond a three-part thesis. A three-part thesis limits your writing and it confines you to only focusing on 3 things when often the scope of your writing needs to go beyond those concepts. Sometimes the best way to move beyond a three-part thesis is to expand your thesis statement to more than one sentence of writing. For example, instead of arguing that this paper will look at the current trends, scholarship, and theories regarding evolution, you need to introduce some of what that work will look like. This paper will move beyond classic scholarship and evolution to explore not only where we are currently, but also where we might go in the future. To do this work well, it will examine the scholars leading us in this direction, as well as the theories they present. While the ideas in both of these thesis statements are similar, now you've given yourself more room in the second one to also provide historical context and connect to the theories of the scholars. You've created more depth and given your paper more room to explore. We also recommend that as you take yourself beyond the three-part thesis, you move beyond the 5-paragraph essay. The 5-paragraph essay is a valued part of writing. I don't want to knock it. It allows us to get our ideas down quickly and in a well-connected manner. It's absolutely useful for standardized tests like the GRE and for written exams, but it's much less useful for a term paper or something that's going to be longer than 3 pages. So how do you get past the 5-paragraph essay? Well, to do it, you should plot out topic sentences that relate back to your thesis. Come up with as many as you can, and then see which 5 to 6 you want to explore further. Already, you'll have 5 to 6 body paragraphs, not counting your introduction and conclusion, which means you're well past that 5-paragraph essay. An easy way to come up with topic sentences is to look at the evidence you've collected that you want to use to support your thesis. Clarify how each piece of evidence connects to your thesis, and suddenly you've half your body paragraph done. Now all you need is the analysis and summary. For more help on things like this, look at our meal plan handout on our website. Another risk with a 5-paragraph essay is that you often end up with 2 long paragraphs rather than breaking away from the tradition of 3 body paragraphs. So you'll have these like monster paragraphs that will take up an entire page. An easy workaround if you've already written your paper then is to look for places where those paragraphs are too long. As I am constantly telling students that I work with in the Writing Center, whenever you have a new idea, you should have a new paragraph. With long paragraphs, this point often means going back and dividing the paragraph when you move to a new focus or the next part of the story you're telling through your paper. Look for places where you use transition words like additionally, on the other hand, however, moreover, and furthermore. And also look for places where you switch to a new time, in later years, later on, next year, tomorrow, etc. Those are good cue words into the fact that you're moving to a new idea or a new part of the idea, and so you need to move to a new paragraph. Another option is to listen to how other people clearly and concisely describe things and emulate those people. Is there a TED Talk you always recommend to your friends, a TikTok you enjoy based on their descriptions, or a speech you find particularly inspiring? For me, honestly, it's the September 11th speech by George W. Bush. I think that speech emulates wonderful language, wonderful use of pathos. And so when I'm trying to illustrate pathos to a student, that's a speech that I will go and pull. He also does a great job with repetition and word choice. You can also think about whether or not you have a professor who delivers lessons well, or whether or not you have a friend that communicates well. Those are the type of people that you can emulate in your own writing. But you should ask yourself, what is it about these forms of communication that appeal to you? Examine them for tone, word usage, examples, and organization, and then emulate that style in your writing. You can re-listen to these presentations too with a new eye to looking at the words they use, the comparisons they make, the other people they discuss, the examples they use, and how they impart their lessons. For example, if you were listening to I Am Prepared to Die by Nelson Mandela, you would come across the following. He writes, having said this, I must deal immediately at some length with the question of violence. Some of the things so far told to the court are true, and some are untrue. I do not, however, deny that I planned sabotage. I did not plan it in a spirit of recklessness, nor because I have any love of violence. I planned it as a result of a calm and sober assessment of the political situation that had arisen after many years of tyranny, exploitation, and oppression of my people by the whites. As you read this sort of quotation, you want to think about what words they use, especially words for, in this case, like that Nelson Mandela uses repeatedly, right? So there's repeated calls to things like violence. There's repeated focus on ideas like tyranny that let you know that this is a speaker who is really passionate about these areas and is genuinely concerned about them. You want to think about emotions that this portion and other speeches that you like portray, how they might have used their voice to get their ideas across. Did they get quiet at some point? Did they speak louder at some point? Those are the areas that you'll want to emphasize in your own writing. You also want to think about examples that are provided. Again, we love a good example. And here, Nelson Mandela is talking about tyranny, exploitation, and oppression. These are very clear things, very clear concepts that we can all understand are dangerous. And then you also want to think about images that they call to mind with their words. Thinking about things like not having any love of violence, right? There's a distaste there. Thinking about the ideas of sabotage and what images sabotage calls up. And then the words like calm and sober assessment that let us know that they've gone into this action having thought about it. If you can look at speeches like this one and think about what you might want to emulate, then you will have a better idea of how to write and how to get your audience to feel the way that speech makes you feel. As our student success tutors will tell you, there are many different types of learners. We have visual, auditory, or oral. We also have reading listeners and kinesthetic learners, those who learn by doing. So while listening is a great method of examining what works, reading is also going to be key to tap into those different learning styles. So consider the authors you admire, the scripts that impress you, and even the resources that got you thinking, and copy their style. What is it you like about the words they use, the way they present their information, that gets you hooked and interested? For example, if you're reading the portion of the following article, Cure for the Common Cold, and Dr. Watts writes, I was a member of a medical school admission committee for almost a decade. Through the chair in front of my desk streamed the intellectually elite and the altruistically driven. Academic prowess was a constant, but there was also an abiding sense of goodwill. By their third year of medical school, however, these aspiring physicians had changed. Here you can ask yourself the same sorts of questions. What word does he use? Again, calling back to those transition words, we know with however at the end there that his tone is changing and that what is happening is changing. And sure enough, he even uses the word change to let us know something different is coming. We also have to think about emotions that the author is portraying here. If we think specifically about ideas like intellect and school, we're getting a very specific vibe here. We also need to think about examples that he provides as he talks about being an advisor to these students. And finally, we need to think about the images this section calls to mind as it talks about the passing of time from their first year to their third year and how these students streamed through his office, meaning there was a steady flow of new students coming in and old students leaving. You also need to accept the genre of the shitty first draft. And I do apologize for the language there, but when we write, we do not write for perfection the first time. We write simply to get our ideas out and to make sure we have some idea of where we're going. I had a professor who called this the word dump. We just dump a bunch of words on the page and see what's happening. To assume we can write perfectly the first time is erroneous in the extreme, a fact famous author Anne Lamott points out in her book, Bird by Bird. She writes, for me and most of the other writers I know, writing is not rapturous, meaning we don't enjoy doing it. In fact, the only way I can get anything written at all is to write really, really shitty first drafts. The first draft is the child's draft, where you let it all pour out and then let it romp all over the place, knowing that no one is going to see it and that you can shape it later. You just let this childlike part of you channel whatever voices and visions come through and onto the page. Lamont continues, almost all good writing begins with terrible first efforts. You need to start somewhere. Start by getting something, anything, down on paper. A friend of mine says that the first draft is the down draft. You just get it down. The second draft is the up draft. You fix it up. You try to say what you have to say more accurately. And the third draft is the dental draft, where you check every tooth to see if it's loose or cramped or decayed or even, God help us, healthy. You are going to write a minimum of 3 drafts, though likely many more, if you want to create something stunning. So make sure to give yourself that time and accept the genre of the shitty first draft. Get comfortable with a thesaurus. It's a hard word to say, but it's an easy tool to use. You should use a thesaurus anytime your writing starts to feel repetitive. It's likely that your points aren't repetitive, but your wording of them is. This repetitiveness can make your points seem redundant, even when they're not. You should always be prepared to check the advice your thesaurus gives you by looking up the recommended words in the dictionary to make sure they're accurate. In the past, for example, Word has recommended changing abstract to summary, but these two words have very different meanings in the context of an academic paper. And so always checking what the definition of the word they recommend you use is will cue you into whether or not it's a good replacement. You should always take breaks between drafts. I tell students this all the time about writing and about studying too. You can't cram it all in one session. You've got to take breaks, which is why you have to make sure you give yourself enough time. Because you're going to make so many drafts, you're not going to do them all in one go. Like Lamont hits at, there is some time off between drafts. You have to let your writing sit and be patient with the process. Writing, just like any other form of creative artistic endeavor, requires thoughtful reflection to tweak your work and get it where it needs to be. So what we recommend is every time you create a new draft, step back and let it marinate, work on some other homework, watch a show or two on Netflix, or eat something, and then come back to it. Try to take at least a half hour off, a day or two is best if you can work it, so that you can come back to your work with a fresh perspective. Bonus points if you read your writing out loud to yourself, as you hear different mistakes than you see visually. Leave yourself time to edit, edit, edit. As Lamont hits that last draft, that dental draft, is when you're really going to need to get into the nitty and gritty of editing. So editing is the last step to strong writing. We recommend waiting until you're done with almost a full draft before you go back and edit. If you try to edit as you write, you actually engage a different part of your brain, and that can often lead to writer's block. So instead, you can do this work by writing by hand instead of on your laptop to let the words come across with less interruptions. You can ignore all spelling and grammar suggestions until you're done. I've even known some people to just turn off their computer and type while their computer screen is off so that they can get their ideas out there without any of those distractions. And then you also want to make sure that you don't get tripped up by the thesaurus or other great features while you're writing your first few drafts. Once you're ready to edit, recognize that this work will also happen in stages. You'll read it once or twice, hopefully out loud, and then edit. Then you'll remember to run spell check. Then you might decide you want to tweak your thesis or the topic sentences or something else entirely. Leave yourself time to do this work. It's a very important part of the creative process. Bonus tip, make use of your resources. Get assistance. The Career Center will help you with the content of personal statements, resumes, and CVs. Get a second set of eyes. The Writing Center tutors will help you with all of the above, as well as any papers, essays, or written/oral presentations. The Student Success tutors will help you find the methods that work best for you to get your work done well. And then find resources. The librarians will help you find useful sources on which to write and also to emulate. Additionally, here are some of the resources we use tonight. If you would like a copy of this PowerPoint, please email me and I am more than happy to send it to you. My email again is ascanlon@iwu.edu. Thank you so much.